It's time to talk about another Netflix movie that only has one word for its title, and thank God, it's way better than Mute. Yeah, so I finally got to watch Cargo. It's this Australian-funded survival thriller picture starring Martin Freeman that dropped onto Netflix a couple weeks ago, I believe, mid-May. It's by far one of the best movies I've seen in 2018. And I feel like this was what was kind of needed for me when it comes to not just the survival thriller genre, but zombie apocalypse genre in general, because zombies are getting pretty played out, you have to admit. Whether that's through legit zombie apocalypse type scenario movies, whether that's through parodying them, whether that's through their overexploitation on shows like The Walking Dead. It's kind of hard to have a very visceral or gut reaction to the bleakness, the alienation, and the societal implications of a zombie apocalypse anymore. You know, we've gotten so accustomed to seeing it on a weekly episodic basis. It's hard to find a way to reinvigorate the brand of zombie apocalypse. And thankfully, Cargo does it pretty well. I wouldn't go so far as to call this a survival horror movie. It's not really too scary. It definitely has very suspenseful moments. The recently undead coming back to life and reanimating and eating people. They have all that in there. But it doesn't deal so much with graphic horror. It's more just about the psychological kind of undertones and a very just simple story about a father just trying to get through this landscape of death and bleakness and inherent untrustworthiness, as you find out in the movie. It's just more focused on that, just with the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse. And I keep saying zombie apocalypse when it's not really clear that that's what that is. It's more like an epidemic, I should say. Martin Freeman is in Australia with his family, and you kind of get right into the middle of the situation. There's no setup to it like it is in movies like World War Z or things like that. You never really find out what the actual origin of the zombie epidemic is. It's been going on for a while when you get into the movie, because people are given like these containment packs of like, here's what you need to do step by step if you find out you're infected. And I don't feel like I'm getting into spoilers here, because this is a part of just the general plot, is that at one point, Martin Freeman finds out that he has become infected. In this world, when you're infected, typically it takes about 48 hours for you to become fully converted, and during that time you go through like seizures and muscle spasms and things like listlessness. You start to lose a little bit of your mind as it goes on and on. The movie is more about his trek across the Australian wilderness, across the outback, with his infant daughter in tow, so that their goal could be a couple of things. It might be he reaches a military installation or a safe zone where he could possibly be treated and cured in time, or it could be just to get his daughter out of this hazardous wasteland. And along the way, he encounters several different characters, makes several different stops, and it is a really compelling, really emotionally heavy bit of filmmaking. Martin Freeman is really, really solid in this role. He plays several different hands in this. I mean, he can have that Martin Freeman quirkiness at times, and it's cool to see that shine through. Have a little bit of brightness in this story whenever he's baby talking to his daughter, or there's a point where he befriends an Aborigine girl and she plays a really good kind of counterbalance to him throughout the movie, and they end up kind of befriending each other, and it's really kind of a sweet balance. But then he can get to the dark places really well. When you see him dealing with his 48-hour period of possibly converting into a zombie, and you see him kind of going through these changes, not just physical changes, but also like psychological, like I mentioned before, emotional changes, after he encounters all these different people in the outback who are getting by in their own unique and twisted ways. His response and his kind of reaction to them is very convincing. And he can do heart-wrenching too. There's a lot of moments in this movie that you'll find him just at the end of his rope and destitute, and he sells you on that this character is just a shade or a hair away from giving up completely. That's one thing I've always really appreciated about Martin Freeman in a lot of his performances. Especially recently, he was by far the best thing about the Hobbit movies, especially in his role as Watson. In the last season of Sherlock that occurred where he had to play grief and he had to play loss, he amplifies that a lot in this movie. You wouldn't anticipate the choices he uses here. They might feel either a little too subdued or not melodramatic enough for the typical moviegoer's taste, but I really like that about Martin Freeman's choices in this movie, is that they might at first seem a little unexpected, but then when you actually go back and think about it, that's probably how you would actually just instinctually react to the situation presented to you. You wouldn't be all like silent, sexy crying or anything like that. You would just kind of be like him at a certain point. He's just up against a car at one point, banging his head against it and just like yelling his head off. You know, it isn't like a glamorous mourning or grieving period that you typically see in movies. It is raw, it is intense. And I mean, his performance is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all the kind of phenomenal things about this movie. I love the location. I love the setting for this. This may have been done before with other movies, but this particular film does a really good job of showing like the desolate wasteland, of showing the isolation you can feel, because you'll have just long scenes of him walking across just a flat, barren, almost desert wasteland with just a couple of shrubs here and there. You'll have him and his daughter and the Aborigine girl kind of camped out in these rock formations. You'll have a lot of the Australian wildlife adds a lot of character, especially if you notice at certain points, like at night on a like long desert plain, he shines a light off into the distance and you just see a couple of figures like shambling in the distance. Like, that is creepy. That's far creepier than, say, a jump scare of a zombie just like running at you really fast and shrieking its head off. While it's very simple, I love that they are able to kind of build a lot of the world of this story very well. The fact that they have things like those containment packs that have like a stopwatch for you to monitor your 48-hour conversion period, and they have like step-by-step directions. They give you like this needle that if you feel like it's too late or you feel yourself converting, you know, very soon, that you just basically take this hypodermic needle and like inject it into your temple and kill yourself. That this is a world fully realized, that maybe this epidemic has been going on for a while and they've been able to kind of come up with these solutions to it. The characters he meets this one character named Vic who is kind of unhinged, and you discover a little bit later on with regards to his situation, but he has this whole process of trapping people he finds, like people who are still human, and trapping them in cages to lure zombies to them so that he can target practice. And there's a whole mechanism with regards to the cages he puts people in. There's this short scene, but really well done scene, where Martin Freeman and his daughter enter this abandoned kind of village and school area, and there's just one school teacher there. Like, all of her kids were Aborigine kids, and they went back to their tribes after the epidemic happened, and it's just her there, like looking out for the place, essentially. And it adds a lot of character. There's a lot of stuff that you feel is hinted at with regards to backstory and things like that, but the movie knows well enough to just leave you intrigued with, oh, she removes her wig at one point, and you discover that she's maybe in remission or something like that, and you're kind of wondering, like, well, that's a cool twist. That's a kind of a cool addition to her character, without getting into that, because you realize that's not really what the meat and potatoes of the story is about. There's a lot of cool stuff done with the girl's Aborigine tribe. Her mother and her family are out there surviving for themselves. They often cut to them either luring zombies to just kill them or looking for her. The visual standpoint of that is really cool too. You'll have this tribe building like a fire in the distance, and the smoke just covers all of the outback, all of this plain, and you see either them walking through silently, deftly with their sticks, beating zombies to death, or you'll see like the zombies just shuffling around. Even the process by which people become zombified in this movie is interesting, to the effect of like you get bitten, you get infected, you start to, have these fits and these convulsions, but it's nothing that takes you out completely. But then there's a certain point where you'll instinctually need to find darkness and to kind of hide and, let the rest of the virus, I guess, germinate in you. And so there's a point where you see like bodies in a hillside with their heads buried in the sand. Like they tore up the ground and put their heads in there and buried themselves up to their necks. So you'll have people like just with their heads in the ground. And that alone, like at first you're kind of like, what is that? But then they start to move and you're like, oh crap. That is as unnerving as any jump scare. These zombies, they are the Romero slow moving but still menacing type of zombies. There's a scene where Martin Freeman's trying to get gas into this truck. He doesn't notice that in the background quietly there's just this figure shuffling. He doesn't even notice it until that figure is upon him. That quiet sequence was really chilling. It's a really chilling movie. It's not without a little bit of lightness, a little bit of sweetness to it, because it is a story about a father trying to get his daughter out of this situation. They picked the most adorable baby girl to play Martin Freeman's daughter. Every time this little baby girl was on screen, I just beamed, because she is you'll see it in the thumbnail, she's just the sweetest looking baby. It's pretty amazing that they were able to get her to legitimately act. I know that's a stretch. I mean, I'm sure, being in the outback in the sweltering heat was probably torture enough for the kid, but the scenes where you expect her to be really kind of sad and, distressed that she's in this situation, like, it's done very well, and Martin Freeman holds her and comforts her very well, and she has an immediate, like, affection for him, even though it's probably not her real, it's not Martin Freeman's kid, but there's a point in the movie where he has just kind of come over one of his fits, and because having his daughter there is kind of a stabling presence for him as he goes through this change. There's a point where he's just kind of holding her close and like, just holding her close and like, you're what's keeping me, you're what's keeping me here, essentially. You're holding me together. And the little girl just instinctively like grabs him by the face and is just like, and just starts like cuddling his face. I'm just like, oh, that's so sweet. It's the first survival zombie movie where I'm just like, feels, big feels here. It really does this story such a good service to have that emotional connection. It could have just been played straight for the bleakness of it, and it does. This movie does end on a depressing note a little bit. I mean, yeah, there's a sad ending to this movie, but it's not fully sad when you realize kind of what steps are taken to bring the movie to an end. There's a really creative thing Martin Freeman does at the end of this movie to kind of bring it to this conclusion. And like I said, his performance, his rapport with this baby, his rapport with this little Aborigine girl is really well done. She's I think this is her first movie, and she does a really good job. She is portrayed as this very resourceful, very smart, very bright kid who's gone through her fair share of trauma with regards to her family and this situation. She establishes a very believable friendship with Freeman as the story continues. There's a point where it's like she's holding the baby after Freeman's like having one of his episodes, and he just looks up and he doesn't know where his daughter, I believe her name is Rosie, where Rosie went, and then you just see the little girl holding Rosie and like caring for her, and it's that human angle that really anchors you into like, I know this isn't gonna end 100% happy, but I really want it to. It is really emotionally investing without being too manipulative. I can see why this wasn't released to a wider audience, why it is a Netflix release, because this thing would get buried by a bunch of stupid or shallow stuff that goes over like gangbusters in big theaters. And that's a shame that you have to find a good quality survival horror movie with some emotional depth to it on a streaming service. It's not going to be the startling jump scare horror type that the majority of audiences always get a kick out of. This is on par almost with A Quiet Place, on par with something like It Comes at Night, in that it plays on the suspense, on drawing out certain scenarios and certain anxieties. But at the same time, there is a fair degree of heart. Like, so far, I think it is my best movie of the year. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be toppled by that anytime soon, because I really haven't put a lot of movies yet into the best of category. There's only a couple there right now, but so far it's the highest ranking one. It just hit the sweet spot for me when I was watching it. It was simple, straightforward, had just a fabulous way of being able to build up its story and its world, and the performances again are really well done. So I hope to see more of this type of movie. I hope to see more performances from Martin Freeman with regards to this type of angle. I would love to see more of that girl in more movies. She really, for a debut performance, it's really well done. And honestly, I would love to see more of Freeman's daughter, because what an expressive baby. I'll end on this note. There's a point, they're in a car crash, and Freeman's in the front seat, and he's kind of dazed, confused a little bit, and the baby's in the back seat with her child seat there and so forth, and just the look of, I don't know if it's just naturally whatever mood the baby was in, or they had to get her to express in that way somehow, but there's a look of like like not like crying, not like that quite yet, but just a look of like, what the fuck? And it is convincing and adorable at the same time. Check out Cargo. It is a good film, a very good, well done film, and like I mentioned at the very beginning, kind of what I needed to get reinvested in this particular subgenre of horror thriller movies. Of the zombie apocalypse scenario, this made it interesting for me again. You're gonna have a blast with it.